Jenny Mulberg. I am the editor-in-chief of Ploughshares, and I'm just so thrilled that you all came out tonight to see this stellar lineup of readers, along with the fabulous poet, performer, and absolute goddess Annie Finch, who is the guest editor of the new spring issue, which is so beautiful. So I will introduce Annie, who will speak about the issue, and then our fabulous Ploughshares staff will introduce tonight's readers. Trident is selling copies of the spring issue as well as books by our readers, including Annie Finch's The Poetry Witch's Little Book of Spells. So pick up books by our readers, get them signed, stay and hang out after the reading. And also, I hope you entered the raffle, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Finally, oh, yeah, I just said that. Okay, so many thanks to the great folks at Trident for hosting our launch parties. We appreciate you so much. And thank you to the Department of Writing, Literature, and Publishing at Emerson College for co-sponsoring this event, and the School of Arts and Interdisciplinary Studies for their continued support of Ploughshares. In her editor's note to the issue, Annie Finch harkens spring, which, I mean, it's just like, it's so perfect. She writes, a poem whose elixir of structure and meaning wafts through us like the scent of a flower nourishes us in a way so primal that we, even as we yearn for it, may not know or need to know why we yearn. Its spell can know us better than we know ourselves. This beautiful sense of the symbiosis between art and human experience, which evokes Yeats's revelations, turning and turning in the widening gyre, appears again and again in Annie's own poems, which always possess a deep sense of musicality and lyricism. In her poem, The Spirals at Hand, she writes, the spirals at hand where we love, rule, and flower our world into life, turning at last in our own sacred power, the spirals at hand where we gather and flower. Based in New York City, Annie Finch is the author of Spells, New and Selected Poems, and 6 other volumes of poetry, as well as verse plays, opera libretto, A Poet's Craft, and a dozen other influential books on poetry and writings on feminism and spirituality, including the groundbreaking Choice Words, Writers on Abortion. And speaking of flowers, Annie, we want to thank you for the beautiful curation of this issue and traveling to Boston to be with us this week. So please join me in welcoming Annie Finch.
Wow, what a beautiful surprise. And I hope this issue will also be for you a bouquet of beautiful surprises. Because one of the things I learned when putting this issue together was the way the multiplicity of poems can create an ecosystem together. And I've done a lot of editing. I've edited about 10 books. Involving poetry in one way or another. But this is the first time I think that I've ever really felt a complete breadth, like the entire world of literature available to me. And it represents about 40 years of being very, very, very picky, like picking flowers, like walking through a whole field and, that's the one. And these poets and this one amazing fiction writer who's here, and the 3 fiction writers in the issue, are, I think, unique within our time, rare within our time, and also very much of our time, but in a deeper way than a lot of literature is. They have roots that go down into what we're all dealing with, but they go down deeper than a lot of literature does. And because of that, they are nourished by the minerals that are in the soil underneath the crappy topsoil we have to live under, We have to live on this crappy topsoil. They go down deeper. So the fiction writers, including Karen Wynn, who you'll hear tonight, they go down into the tail, into the structure that teaches us a truth much deeper than our reality. And they do it by leaving the ego and the personal emotions kind of above on the topsoil, and they go down deeper to the thing that's universal. Similarly, the poets also are going down below the chatter of our minds and the way we usually think, and that kind of, monkey mind, as they call it, which so much of our language is. And they go down into the place where language speaks more authentically because it is not speaking so much from the self. And we can tell this when we feel it in our bodies. This is how I edited the issue. This is how I chose it, was when I felt it in my body, like, yes, like a delicious kind of a sense of recognition of the rhythms in my body, recognizing the rhythms in how these words were put together. This is coming from something that's not just about the mind or the individual self. This is coming from something that is truly nourishing, that can truly sprout something new and fresh that will help us because it's rooted in what we all share together with each other and also with the past and the present as well. The past and the future human beings. In other words, I could say that this issue is, for me, the culmination of a lifetime. Truly, I think I edited my first creation in 3rd grade. Yep. 3rd grade. I picked my favorite poems from my poetry books that I had, and I put them together, and I illustrated it. And so that was 60 years ago. And in this entire time, this issue really, it allowed me to pull so freely, and the support of Ploughshares was so great. It's a really beautiful, beautiful staff, incredible talent, and such delightful people. Every single one, truly. Jenny and Rachel, and then Allison's cover, and then you, is it Matt? Yes, wonderful. Just amazing. It all just gave me this sense of just freedom and joy through it, which I had through every single moment of this process, truly. It was a total joy. And when I volunteered to put them in order myself, because I didn't want to just be alphabetical, I had so much fun because I got to choose 3 egg poems that were going to fit next to each other by 3 different poets. And and it was like, that was my Rosetta Stone, and it worked. So, and then I understand that Allison did a search, and there are a lot of sewing imagery in here. There's sewing imagery, there's egg imagery, there's flowers and plants, and there's this incredible island in Karen's story. And there's just, it's like a whole world in this issue, and I'm so excited about it. And for me, it is the end of the poetry wars. The 1980s was full of wars between the language poets and the formalists and the performance poets. To me, it represented all the agonies I went through in those decades. It's over because all those different kinds of poetry are in here together, and they're all human. And that's what it's all about, right? What do we have in our kinship and our kindness? And that's the humanity of it. So I will just leave you with a 2-line poem, which is a blessing on the heart. And it's in the meter of the heart, the dactylic meter. Heart of the waves rocking, flow in us. Love sweet as water, come grow in us. Heart of the waves rocking, flow in us. Love sweet as water, come grow in us. Heart of the waves rocking, flow in us. Love sweet as water, come grow in us. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Give it up for Annie Finch one more time. Thank you all so much for being here for a night of incredible readers. I'm Allison Truge. I'm the art director of Ploughshares. Thank you so much for joining us. I have the immense pleasure of introducing our first reader, the Gabrielle Bates. The worlds that Gabrielle has built in the 2 poems published in this issue, Lady Patriots and Fatigue to Which All Flesh is Heir, are unbelievably lush and intimate. And I'm so excited to hear her read these poems today. Gabrielle Bates is the author of Judas Goat, an NPR Best Book of 2023, New York Times Book Review Critics Pick, and finalist for the Washington State Book Award. Currently, the 2026 Writer-in-Residence at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. She also works for Open Books, A Poem Emporium, co-hosts the podcast The Poet Salon, and serves occasionally as visiting faculty for the University of Washington Rome Center, the Tin House Workshops, and the Rainier Writing Workshop MFA program. Please welcome up Gabrielle Bates.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Jenny. Everyone at Ploughshares, truly. Thank you for having me. Annie, you curated a hell of an issue with this. I really can't remember the last time I read a copy of an issue cover to cover and experienced this many thrills, particularly at the level of form and structure. It feels incredibly alive and like a real gift. So thank you. I'm gonna read the two pieces I have in the new issue, a poem from my book, Judas Goat, and then one new poem. I wanted to write a volleyball poem for many years, but as many of the writers in the room know, when you want to write a poem about a particular thing, that dooms it forever. And so I wasn't actually able to write the volleyball poem until a friend invited me to take part in a reading they were calling a horny queer reading, and I wanted to write something new for that. And of course, in trying to write that, I was able to write my volleyball poem at last. So shout out to that. I dare say there's no horniness quite like the horniness of being a closeted queer Christian virgin athlete in Alabama. The last thing I'll say before I read the poem is that I wrote it at a time when I was also working on a craft talk about spirals, and the spiral as an inspiration and structure possibility for poems, and that helped me land on the formal conceit, the intervals by which the stanzas are lengthening as the poem goes on. And I have to thank Annie again for helping me make some final edits that really committed to that form more fully. Lady Patriots. Juices swell in pairs again. Fruits fallen all around us, outlining our shapes. Athletic, young. Where the armory stood behind the school, a field that couldn't be shared, beheld from its edges, hard and green, then soft, then shadowed. Coach made us lie on our backs to see this in our minds, ace after ace, closed in our faces. Distance means I can almost miss how we retched in the bin for trash outside the door, how I hurdled myself between the floor and what another girl slapped as hard as she could. The whip of her hand and the white ball, even in my dreams, curving over the net. Little quilted moon, occasionally striped with red and blue, the idea of a nation shot down from the sky. When we ran our sprints, the red clock blared down, girl by sweating girl, ferric, the scent of our coincidental wombs, synced sheddings, coarse, our voices shouting lines out or in. Coach harped on the undersung role of the mind. Imagine you are connected by an invisible thread, crucial to keep taut. As we screamed what was ours, whose gap, whose cross shot. In the footage, we saw from above how we moved, like a single six-pronged beast, and it was good, good. 6 fangs in the mouth of one angel. My position meant the free one. My job, to live as low to the ground as a person can live and still be said to stand. It was important, Coach said, to visualize what we wanted. Let us pray. We closed our eyes and saw regionals, state, a spot in heaven, the occasional smut scene starring Abilene, Sienna, Mary Beth. Every gameless afternoon, I would lie next to X in her bed, our faces close on the same pillow, wanting to wake with her hair in my mouth, to wrap my wrists with the invisible lines, connecting our hips until we drooled. I prayed on a loop like a spell, darkening the room, turning the moon into morning light, morning's light back to the moon. Twice through eyelids pretending to be closed, I watched her stand at the mirror, naked for me, turning side to side, unravished bride, mythical bird that burns on a cycle every day, resolveless. Green pears in rot, enwreathed in mold, the weight of tanks. I got so low, the seeds got a taste of my knees. We ran our drills, falling at a spin, practicing, a looking that was also touching, looking. That was a kind of life. I have too much love and admiration for the sonnet to call this next poem a sonnet, but it does have 14 lines. So we could call it an American sonnet, perhaps. This is fatigue to which all flesh is heir. I've attended river baptisms and the Cahaba, church baptisms and Columbiana prop. I would have done a grand dunk myself, I think, had I trusted a single man to touch me. Only my first love I trusted, and then only because he found my body repulsive. It felt cruel, forcing him even to witness my arms. For a long time, it comforted me to know distance can be a kind of religion. I remain open and lonely to the invisible, a catfish tasting pond with the length of its skin. My diaphragm expands, but the pushed air halts at the threshold. My cords don't budge. Only the air elsewhere can touch them. Okay. So those were the Ploughshares poems from the new issue. I had the great luck to have a poem published in Ploughshares once before, which ended up, a slightly tweaked version of it, ended up in my first book, my first and only book, Judas Goat. And so I thought I would read that one tonight as well, because we're celebrating Ploughshares largely across issues. This poem is called Intro to Theater. I can remember one particular time in her grandparents' attic. Her legs slightly older than mine, shaved amphibian smooth. her breath around my face like an evaporated puddle. Naked or almost, in semi-darkness, her blue eyes dusk. We wouldn't allow our mouths to touch. She'd hold her hand over mine and tongue her own knuckles. Each time was the last time until the real last time, which felt more like a beginning. Earth on the third day, alluvium, swamp lily, wax myrtle, rose mallow. Adam would kiss me in a similar way not long after, as part of the school play, using his thumb to make a barrier between our lips, and all our classmates would watch us. I was bleeding from my center. I remember the moment his hand made contact with my face. Forgettable line he'd scrawled in blue ink, risking to smear across my cheek. So much time passed between the kiss and the ending. I remember thinking it seemed like the applause was for our deaths. Thank you all so much. I'll close out with this, which is a new poem. And I guess I won't preface it with anything. You can probably tell I'm pregnant, but if you can't, spoiler alert for this poem. This is called Daughter. I was looking for an old knowledge I could make new. Dehorn your cattle when the sign's in the legs. Kill a barn swallow, get blood in your milk. Dig by the moon's dark, prune by its light. I read all afternoon in my office on the third floor. A passage on shovels reminded me of crossing that one green pasture with my mother before we buried her mother again, closer to our dead kin, the dairy bootleggers. The dead can't sleep if you're always making noise, but I have never known a soul with my blood who wants to sleep once dead more than 4 days. The women, especially, are always wanting to wake up, shiver in the grasses, sigh. The worst pain of my life, I was far from the South, holding my belly, screaming in silence, and one came to me, ravenous, her eyes widening, taking my pain in and in, like a lover after a too long, anguished absence, drinking as much as they can at one time, the expressions, freckles, eyes of the desired. I don't know who she was, but she belonged to me. Her grave had been left open overnight, leaving her to grasp after our awful music forever. I felt myself all the way down to be full of sons, sons I would die with, tucked inside. So when I found out I might be rounding with a daughter, I had to walk many miles when the sign was high in the knees, and the knees were bent in snow, and sap, freezing in the trees, split, loud slits up their middles. Lines a child pried open to enter, dug, but not yet cut by me. Thank you.
That was so
so beautiful. Thank you, Gabrielle. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Dillon. I'm the managing editor here at Ploughshares, and I'm so thrilled to see such a crowded room. This is amazing. Thank you all for coming. Let's see. I have the joy of introducing our next reader, the poet Jane Huffman. Jane's debut collection, Public Abstract, is a poetry collection that truly makes me want to write each time I read it, and I've reread it multiple times. Her work deftly plays with sound, form, and mystery in ways reminiscent of Emily Dickinson or Elizabeth Bishop, yet entirely unique to Jane's incredible mind. Jane is also a fantastic editor and instructor who I've had the honor of studying with, and we're so lucky to have her here with us. And I think you're teaching a class on Saturday, I saw, in Yarmouth, so if anyone wants to make the journey, you too could study with Jane this weekend. Jane Huffman is the author of Public Abstract, winner of the 2023 APR Honickman First Book Prize. She is a doctoral student in English and Literary Arts at the University of Denver. Her poems have appeared in The Nation, The Atlantic, Poetry Magazine, The New Yorker, and elsewhere. She was a 2019 recipient of the Ruth Lilly and Dorothy Sargent Rosenberg Fellowship from the Poetry Foundation. Please give it up for Jane Huffman.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction, Rachel. And thank you so much to Ploughshares for having me this evening, and of course for publishing and supporting my work. And a big special thanks to Annie. Annie, your work has meant so much to me for so long as a scholar and lover of form, and so it was just really a privilege to collaborate in this way. I'll start by reading my piece that was in Ploughshares. Then I'll read some poems from my book, Public Abstract, and then I'll read a couple of new poems. They're short. Okay. This poem owes a great debt to a few writers, specifically Lynn Emanuel, one of my favorite poets. Her poem, In English in a Poem, that's the title of it, contains the line, "I hate being moving." And it's always been sort of a mantra of mine. And so this poem is a response to and an homage to that piece. It also owes a great debt to Gertrude Stein, who's a tremendous role model of mine, specifically her book, The Making of Americans. So this is called A Few Notes on a Poem by Lynn Emanuel. I don't like moving too, being moving myself and by myself through space. It means permeating in a new way, measuring the day differently, carrying as if on my back, heavy as a dressing table, my own image, what I want to do when I get there, dealing with my things, what moves me and what doesn't, to action. And so I avoid it as I can, overstay in the unmoving world where it is cold enough for me to write, because I must be cold to write, coldness being what moves me forward, overt coldness if nothing else, which I too often disguise as a motion of mind, the kind of moving I can rely on. I admit, I've been moved before, by certain movements of water and light. Emanuel's poem recently, a lecture on indifference in America and Gertrude Stein. She who was greatly unmoved until the end, her face wooden, her reading chair wooden beneath her momentous black velvet overcoats. But to move you? No, I shouldn't. Thank you. All right, so I'm gonna just read a few pieces from my book here, Public Abstract. And I was thinking about how often I do sort of reader response poems, and how that poem, of course, is a reader response poem. And so I thought I would read a few pieces from this collection that do a similar thing, although in a very different way. This is also a good April poem. This is called Why the Dead. Why the dead, this woman, Jean, come after me, distended in their crowns. I don't know why the dead come after me in crowds of Jeans, proclaiming that the god of death before the door to life was shut, slipped out into the slapping rain. Today is Easter Sunday, and I'm reading Jean again. This is called I Reached an Arm. I reached an arm across Louise, and doing so, I made a shape. It gave me pause, a wending shape. An absent mind, she said, goes limb to limb with the sublime. Our dialogue was saucerless and glassy, overgrown with cultures, like the sunless pool of water ponding underneath our garden chairs, a multiplying trawl of stillness, wisdomless and gold with fish, she said. And this is where I stayed my listening to scratch an itch of shame. A goldfish pond is mostly water, little gold in it at all, despite its name. Okay, I'll read the title poem. It's called Public Abstract. I swept and am sweeping, have slept and am sleeping. I heaved the head of the mop to the hod, and I'm heaving. I'm sweating. I'm wetting the corn of my broom. I'm washing the floor in the room where I waited for reason. I reasoned. I teased at the edges of reason. Okay. And this is called I Was Reticent in Childhood. I was reticent in childhood, prepared for nothing, testing fragrant waters at the toilet water counter, diagramming sentences. I ran the empty aisles of Mercy's auditorium, annexed out of my own little annex, made a little art of panicking. Okay, because I read the first poem in the book, I think I'll read the last one as well, which is also a reader response sort of homage poem, and it will become clear to whom. This is called On Difficulty. Difficulty is sacred, even this thought, like a yawn that fights its way out from the inner ear, private as a runny nose. The word say that begins Kay Ryan's seminal poem, say when the rain cannot make you more wet. Say is its own unit of meeting until when arrives and the unit is transformed. Say when. Then tripled by rain, tripled by the rain, which rhymes with the poet's name. Rhyme is so public, weeping openly in a crowded latitude. And I should have said that's a haibun, so it's sort of a little like prose blurb, followed by a little haiku-ish thing. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, I'll just read a couple of small pieces that are brand new. This is a poem that came to me after I read a misprinted poem by the great poet Laura Jensen. The line is supposed to read, "Beauty is made by fear," but it was printed, "Beauty is made my fear." And of course, that stuck with me for years. So this poem is called "Beauty is Made My Fear." What slips from me is what slips from me. Slippage is the hinge on which my life hinges. When the text emerges with a mark missing, I kiss it. The error ablates the face I was making when making it. Eros, a mistake. When I faced it, I lost it. When it slipped from me, and I let it slip from me. Errant tear. This is called Poem with Two Images. I showed this poem to a friend before I had a title for it, and she said, that poem has two images in it. I'm like, thank you. That'll do. I've known abandonment because I've known and loved the image. The image abandons by its nature like nature abandons. If I say, the body is a stone, I have abandoned the body. If I say, the stone is a body, I have abandoned the stone. The image prepared me to sit with her alone, and then by its nature, abandon me. I know the abandon of the image, wild abandon of the image. My body is a stone. Okay, I'll read one more. This is called Unforgiveness. Walking amid apology under sun-washed columns, we two walk across and through one another's privacy, as Williams wrote is the nature of the park. And the intrusion comes welcome, we two having been apart for 15 years, and more having lived lives so private from one another that when we meet now, in the indifferent daylight of strangers meeting, we meet without the strangeness of meeting for the first time, walking under sun-washed columns for many hours, and then sitting and parting easily from the park, the nature of. Thank you all so much.
Hello again. So I've been a longtime fan of Jenna Lee's poems, and it's my honor and pleasure to introduce her tonight. Jenna's deft, incisive, and often subversive poems are so needed, especially these days as we as artists confront and grapple with imperial abuses of power. Lee's poems, like In Defense of Visible Grief in this issue, possess a kind of ancient historical and ecological memory, challenging the erasure of free expression and inspiring a sense of hopeful resistance. Jenna Lee is the author of 3 full-length poetry collections, 6 Rivers, A History of the Cetacean American Diaspora, and Manatee Lagoon. Her poems appear or are forthcoming in Agni, Verse Daily, and elsewhere. A daughter of Vietnamese refugees, she has a BA in math and an MD and works as a physician and educator in New York City. Please join me in welcoming Jenna Lee.
Is this okay? Can you hear me? All right. Thank you so much, Jenny. I'm just going to stand like this. Thank you so much, Rachel, everybody at Ploughshares, and especially Annie Finch, so much for including me in this beautiful issue. So I'm going to start by reading my poems that were in Ploughshares. Thank you. I'm so sorry. I was born this way. But even shorter then. All right. So I'm going to begin by reading. This poem is called Ways of Being. Everyone mentions them in the same breath, lions and tigers. How strange, then, to see they are more different than anyone guessed. Based on the 2 we were lucky to see, lions bask lazily in the same spot, hour after hour, not afraid to be spotted, scrutinized, photographed, chattered about. In contrast to tigers who stride through the grass so quickly, the visitors mobbing the glass have barely a chance to collectively gasp before the cause of their vocalization has passed out of their sightline and into the past. So, thank you. So I think if I didn't do what I currently did, well, I would really have wanted to be another life as a Charlotte Bronte scholar. And I have a lot of poems about Charlotte Bronte and her book Villette, and this is one of them, In Defense of Visible Grief. When he is very ferocious with me, I cry. That sets all things straight, Charlotte Bronte wrote. This passage strikes me as a little sly, yes? In it, Bronte almost seems to gloat about the way that she has weaponized her tears, her God-given power to emote. A male biographer once characterized Bronte as meek on the basis of this quote, a reading that completely missed the point, I think. This morning, let us contemplate why tears put tyrants' noses out of joint, such that they feel a need to denigrate them so intensely. Crying is another form of protest, much like any other. So I'm going to read a couple other newish ones that I haven't read before. I have a little girl at home, so I haven't done poetry readings for a while. This is actually my first in a while, so a lot of this stuff is newer. This is called Autobiographia Literaria. I learned the art of portraiture at 12, to draw the crush who caused my heart to pound, to trace the contours of his lips and nose in the new sketchbook, oblong, spiral bound, that Mom had bought for me along with all the other listed school supplies, to free the new spasmodic squirming in my gut from its oppressive irreality, to copy faithfully a lock of hair that flopped upon an acne-ridden brow, a faithfulness that no one asked of me, but which I gladly hewed to anyhow, to sit across a churning classroom from my chosen subject, whose oblivious face twitched now and then, unconscious of whose hand was feathering his freckles into place. Okay. So this one's called A Kind of Creed. In romance novels I've enjoyed, a common plot device is this. The hero, unaware the heroine requites his feelings, starts to pull away from her in an attempt to keep his heart safe from the pain of jilting, to preempt a future heartbreak. I confess, this never was my way. My brain was born malformed, perhaps, but something makes me stay and wring what rapture I can get out of the serious that only blooms one night all year, inhaling its tart musk with all intentness I can muster, to scrape raw skin against the granite of a transient bliss and love unrecompensed. When I was 10 years old, I owned a pocket dictionary, its weakened covers patched with tape. The other day, unawary, I let it open to the page, whereto its much creased spine had carved out a desire path. A penciled underline tremored beneath the bold-faced word masochism. It's not quite that, though. Pain for its own sake was never what I sought. But when a wasp gleams luminous, I coax it to my hand, not caring if the aftermath is more than I can stand. So I'm going to read a couple of poems from my book, Manatee Lagoon. So this is a short one. It's called How We Met. I want to confess everything about the cow behind the fence, at whose sight I blurted, "Horse," so that I then had to pretend it was a horse I saw. What fibs we tell to gloss over the fact God's fly is always down. I looked the other way to spare him unease. That's how I met your blue eyes across the cocktail lounge. It's how I met everyone I've ever met. All right. This is a sonnet. It's called Patti Smith, 1976. It's about that photograph that Robert Mapplethorpe has of Patti Smith, 1976. Okay. All right. This photo, black and white, where Mapplethorpe portrays his dark mopped ex in profile, seated nude on wooden floorboards, knees drawn up against her breasts to hide her nipples, heated by the sideways radiator pipes on which she rests her palms, her bulging ribs a set of parallel, oblique gray stripes rippling her bare white skin, unsmiling lips a short, flat line. These were my first parameters, my inspirations when I learned to write. On Patty's ribs, the wooden floorings planks, the stacked pale pipes, I modeled my pentameters. The aim, amid such sharp lines, to be frank and raw, yet still control what sees the light. I'll read like one more. So I'll end with a love poem. This is a ekphrastic poem on a painting. It's called Venus Frigida, because that's the name of the painting. I don't really have to say much else about it. The frozen Venus is the image caption, an homage to the jaundiced Latin maxim that all love grows cold when food and drink are absent. Depicted in a sickly green-lit landscape, the fair-flanked goddess squats on bald red fabric and hugs her wind-nipped trunk to fend off gangrene from frostbite, while her son emits a rattly cough in the vicinity of her waxen knees. She pointedly ignores a goat-eared man-beast, an umber-muscled satyr, hovering blackly mere inches from the pair, a bulging basket on his arm. And I don't buy it for a fraction of a second. I've been cold before. If Madame Venus were really cold, she'd grab that damask beneath her hawk and wrap it round her fat knobbed back. I've been cold, and if I were in this tableau, I'd grab pale Cupid, press him to my memories, absorbing all his heat. Good Lord, I'd gladly tackle the brown goat man himself and wrestle him to the dirt. That Terence was a hack. If love were great enough, it would conquer. Come back. Okay, thank you.
Hey, everyone. Oh, I don't know, Johnny. Okay. I'm just kidding. I think I can make it work. I'm Matt, the editorial associate of Readers at Ploughshares. And I'm very excited to introduce Karen Wynn, whose short story, An Updated History of the Modern World, is one of only 3 prose pieces selected for Annie Finch's guest-edited issue of Ploughshares. Of all the introductions I've written for Ploughshares issue launch parties, this is the only one that I truly struggled with, because Karen's piece is my favorite piece I've read during my time at Ploughshares. I couldn't imagine the few words I'd have time to say doing justice to this story, which manages to execute a concept that has reeled me in, back in over and over and over again. How can one short story leave me wondering about what this world actually is and whether or not I even understand it in just a small handful of pages? An updated history of the modern world brings the modern world into focus in ways that are as fresh as they are timeless. I hope to write a story as memorable as Karen's one day. Karen Wynn is the Boston-based author of The Society and Our Little World. Her short stories and essays have appeared in Hippocampus, LitHub, Writer's Digest, and elsewhere. Prior to becoming an author, she was a nurse and nurse practitioner. Please join me in welcoming Karen Wynn.
I was going to take a picture, so I turned my phone on, but we're too quick. We'll get a picture after. You got a picture? Okay, thank you. So thank you so much for that amazing introduction. Truly. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Annie. It is such an honor to be here, to be published in Ploughshares. When I got the notice for the email notice that the piece had been accepted, I was walking through, I was with my husband at the time, and I was walking through my kids' school parking lot, and I started galloping because I was so excited. And I had that moment where I wanted to answer back right away, just like I remember when when I got the contract for my first novel because I was scared that like they were gonna realize they had made some mistake and like rescind it. So anyway, it's such an honor to be here, and I love listening to the fellow contributors. I got chills during each of your readings, so thank you for those beautiful words. So I'm going to read. Unfortunately, because of time, I can't read the full story. I'm going to start at the beginning. And I timed myself earlier, so I'm going to stop at a certain point, but it gets juicier as it goes along. So definitely, check it out and read the full thing. So this story, I don't know where it came from. I think as a writer, you have things rattling around in your brain. My first book was set in 1985, so I had the 80s very much on my brain for a few years. And then, I wrote this after that book had come out, but it was still there. And I was also at one point working at, as Matt had mentioned, I am a nurse and a nurse practitioner. And at one point I was working on a project addressing addressing loneliness in the elderly, which is can affect adversely healthcare outcomes. So I was thinking about connection, and also I have 2 kids, and my son had recently gotten a phone, and I was thinking about all of that, like technology, our world, connection, the 1980s, our future, the crazy state of our world, and so. Yes, trying to sort of wrap my head around it and make sense of all of it. So this was kind of my attempt. It was an early September afternoon, the air stagnant with rare New England humidity, when the girl came to the island. She arrived with her father, the physician, from Boston. She was the first child ever allowed, an exception, the council said, as they blew the conch shell like a horn, signaling the boat's arrival. The new doctor was desperately needed. Dr. Potswich had passed suddenly a week earlier, and the midwife was on the brink of exhaustion between a salmonella outbreak from imported poultry, a set of newborn twins who decided to make an early appearance, and a pesky cough she'd caught. We were curious, gathering at the water's edge, our backpacks at our feet. School had let out minutes earlier, and we'd travel as a pack from the one-story brick structure on Main Street, cutting across the garden's pristine velvet lawn and zigzagging around deep red rose bushes and purple hydrangeas. The young ones scrambled to keep up, urged on by their siblings. The boat came twice a week to bring supplies, medicine for the clinic, meats and non-native produce, items our mothers and fathers had checked off on their weekly mailers, and to export lobsters and other rare seafood the elders harvested off our shores. A single pearl from the world's diminishing oyster population could be bartered for nearly any urgent provision we needed. There were seasonal items that arrived on the boat too. In October, Halloween candies. In February, chocolate hearts. In the warmer months, sunscreen and bug spray. Only rarely did the boat bring a new person, carefully vetted and approved by the council. Someone who was needed. Always an adult. A pharmacist, an engineer, a carpenter, but never an outsider child. The island had rules. The girl looked the same as us, we were disappointed to discover. Tall and lanky, small budding breast, freckles like some of us had across the bridges of our nose. She also smelled like us, her hair damp with sea spray. "Why are you smelling me?" she asked. She stared at the ground. Up close, her skin was pale, like beach sand. "What is your name?" we replied. But she moved away too quickly to respond, following her father into the town hall where they were to be processed and frisked, the small bag of personal items they'd been allowed to bring carefully examined. We heard the shocked murmurs from outside the door, from where we unabashedly pressed our ears. Something found, something hidden. A cell phone, they said, sewn into the lining of the girl's bag. Won't work here anyway, an elder muttered. We raised our eyebrows while mouthing the foreign phrase, testing it out. Cell phone. A phone to sell things to people, one of the older kids declared. And a smidge of distrust appeared towards these newcomers. The council had phones in their homes, but no one else. There were rules to follow, things not allowed on the island. It was why we existed like this, why the elders had come to the island over 60 years earlier. Society had grown too corrupt, too dangerous, the elders said. People were lost. At school, we learned about the larger world we left, the one whose gray-tinged mountains we could barely glimpse on a clear day from the top of the Porter Smith Lighthouse. We had American history and ancient Greek history and history of the modern world. We had other subjects too, algebra and geometry, English, Latin, and chemistry. In the amphitheater, under the tutelage of the librarian, Mrs. Brenner, we performed annual plays the elders had written years earlier. The fall production of Christopher Columbus, Discoverer. The vintage production of Merry, Merry Christmas. We learned how to make papier-mâché smoking volcanoes in the science lab. And we read, together, the classics. Gone with the Wind, 1984, To Kill a Mockingbird, Lord of the Flies, Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Why are you learning all this if you can never leave? Sighed Hannah, the freckle-faced new girl. In her white shirt, she looked washed out. She still wouldn't completely meet our gaze. We can leave, we told her. We just can't come back. Those were the rules. But what happens if you do come back? She challenged. We told her about Michael Potswich. He left at age 19, but 3 years later appeared on a dinghy 50 feet from our shoreline, begging for forgiveness. The sea was choppy that day, and we gathered at the beach to watch as he lurched in the swell, his pleas loud and clear before fading. That was likely the beginning of Dr. Potwich's decline, the elders now noted. In our free time, we played music on our boomboxes and danced under the stars. We rode bikes to the candy store and got bazooka gum for 5 cents apiece. We checked out books from the library and paid overdue fees if we kept them too long. The young ones tagged one another with chants of eeny, meeny, miny, mo. The older ones kissed and stuck hands up shirts when the elders weren't around. We went to the game room to play pool and ping pong, Candyland and Go Fish, Monopoly and Parcheesi, Scrabble, Pac-Man on the solo arcade machine. We lounged on mustard-colored beanbags and sat Indian style on the linoleum floor, chatting away for hours. This is all so boring, sniffed Hannah. She sat alone in the corner of the game room if she bothered to come at all. We didn't pay her much attention. Her newness had worn off, and underneath, she was weird. She often did strange, sudden movements with her body, jerking her arms left and right, clapping her hands together, like a cheerleader without a cheer. One day, Hannah helped herself to our cassettes, rifling through the collection. Why don't you have any music beyond the 80s? She asked. We shrugged, not wanting to admit we'd never realized. Like what? Like, where do I begin? She replied. Backstreet Boys, Radiohead, Lady Gaga, 4 Chairs, Jay-Z, North Kardashian, Ed Sheeran, Popsicle, Harper Beckham, Eminem, Taylor Swift. Eminem, a young one replied. M&M's, a young one replied. Once in a while, the outside world came to get a glimpse of us. They approached on the south side, where the water was calmer, adjacent to the protective sea ridge that fanned out from the northwest side. They arrived in crowded boats, binoculars hanging from their necks, and curious plastic devices pointed at us. The elders would hurry to the statue of Bestia, our island god, whose vision had first come to one of the founding council members in a 7-night dream. As the elders quickly draped a large tarp over Bestia's torso, protecting it from prying eyes, Old Man Sully and Mr. Kranger would hop into the motorboat to chase away the outsiders. Sully spewed warnings and occasional profanity through a megaphone, while Mr. Kranger shook his lawn shears in a threatening fashion. Sometimes Sully's young grandson would accompany them, proudly armed with his water gun and puffing his chest until the ripples nearly caused him to fall overboard. "It's pointless to put a stop to the tourists," Hannah said, meeting our gaze for a few long seconds. "You're all over the internet. Everyone already knows about you guys anyway." "What's the internet?" we asked. She rolled her eyes. During the next full moon, we held Dr. Potchwich's burial. In preparation, the elders knitted a quilt, and we gathered materials from the ground: leaves, rocks, flower petals. When the sun set, the whole town traveled to the water's edge and watched as the council laid down Dr. Potchwich's embalmed body into an empty rowboat. We scattered our offerings on top as Mrs. Potchwich said her goodbye, gently covering her husband with the quilt. Mrs. Brenner handed out song booklets, though most elders already knew Song of the Dead by heart. We began the chorus as Old Man Sully and other volunteers formed a trio of rowboats around the doctors, ushering him far out to the sea, where they tipped the boat. They returned with only the quilt. "Did you just feed him to the sharks?" Hannah asked, her voice trembling. When she turned toward the moonlight, her eyes had a wildness to them. Silently and one by one, we followed Mrs. Potchwich as she began the path of sorrow. Wearing her husband's quilt around her shoulders like a cape, she slowly walked in the direction of town, past Pete's farm and his pasture of cattle and pigs, and toward Main Street, where she shuffled past Anna's bakery and Mr. Martin's milk and more. She lived through the town center, pausing to kiss the foot of the statue of Bestia, and then doubled back toward her home. We traveled behind at a respectful distance, stopping when she approached her home. The final few steps to her front door, Mrs. Potchwich had to make alone. After she entered the house, she hung the quilt from her front window. During the 7 days of mourning, the island was quiet. No unnecessary talking. These were the rules. It was difficult for the little ones, so we had to shush them or take them to the uninhabited east side of the island, where the grass grew long, where they could run around for a couple of hours and shout into the wind that blew out to the sea. School was suspended, and there was nothing but time and sky and earth. Hannah came with us when we went to the east side. She kept to herself, just watching from her perch on the wall of rocks, which our parents had begun building as a pastime years earlier, when they too were young and sought sanctuary here. There had been more deaths then, before the weekly mailers began and the ability to obtain antibiotics and supplies. Hannah's face had become reddened, raw from the wind. All the newcomers' faces were like that for the first few months. On the 8th morning, as school resumed, Hannah hastily approached us on the asphalt. She held open our modern history textbook, her hands shaking. "There are whole decades missing," she informed us, her eyes darting around to ensure no elders could hear. "This doesn't tell the whole story, or even like the correct story. Life didn't stop in the 80s just because your grandparents or great-grandparents or whoever came to the island. This island is like stuck in time. I mean, you have electricity, so you're not totally podunk. But do you realize that there's so much more out there? Like that thing called the internet? There's so much more that happened after these pages. So much more stuff out there," she said, jutting her chin toward the sea. And she began telling us. We were reluctant at first to pay attention. Her words were strange and made us a little uncomfortable. But she didn't stop talking, as if the week of silent mourning had created a too-full balloon of unspoken words she needed to expel. She didn't stop to even take a breath, her face turning redder than usual. Life beyond the island is awesome, she said. Boys marry boys and girls marry boys. You can do whatever you want. We've had a black president and in the coastal states, a woman president. Robots perform entire surgeries. Scientists have altered genes to cure cancer. You can talk to someone on the other side of the world in less than a second. Cars run on sunshine instead of gas. We just diverted a threatening asteroid. We were drawn in. We couldn't help it. Her words were strange, yes, but also magical and wondrous. The bell rang, signaling the start of the school day, but we walked so slowly into the building, hanging on to Hannah's words, now firing off in a maddening whisper, that the teacher reprimanded us to hurry. That day, none of us could pay attention to the lessons at hand. Instead, we looked at one another and out the window. We felt different, changed, like a piece of us had drifted away to somewhere else, somewhere bigger, somewhere better. It was 9-year-old Andrew's idea, create an updated history of the modern world textbook. Despite being young, he was a talented artist and could draw as well as any 13 or 14-year-old. He couldn't write the text, though. He still didn't know how to spell many words, so he needed help. And that was how the project began. We met on the east side of the island every day after school to work on the book. Hannah continued to talk, and we wrote and drew. And I'll stop there. Thank you.